mess up. I know that it's a little crazy that I feel my life for you guys to see almost daily. Sometimes I laugh, I cry, I joke, but here's the real deal for you folks. I'm just a girl who likes to vlog for my cupcakes. Dun. I gotta do that because I don't know how to play the piano. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, welcome to my channel. If you would like, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. And if you don't, that's totally fine. I'm just a normal girl doing normal things, and sometimes that can be kind of boring. Well, today I'm going to talk to you guys about anatomy and physiology and microbiology and why I'm taking them at the same time. But before I get started, I want y'all to know that I'm playing you. You're being played. Why? Because if you see my blower, it's a mess. This backdrop is a company. My mental is trash. So, you're being played, and I wanted to tell you up front because you guys trust me. And I want you to continue to trust me. And that's what's happening with my life. Also, before we get started, I want you guys to know that anything I say about these classes are not necessarily like to give you guys tips, because my only tip is to pass these classes and get into your program. But maybe if I talk about it, you guys can take something from it, or just see that someone else is going through what you're going through. And stuff like that. So, before we get started, not before we get started, but to start off, I will talk about why I'm taking A&P and microbiology at the same time. I am taking A&P 1, and that class I need to take before I take A&P 2. I'm applying for the program for the fall. And so I have this semester and next semester to finish all of my prereqs. And my only prereqs left are microbiology, A&P 1 and 2, human development, pathophysiology. Those are the last 5 classes that I have to take. And so I just split them up between the school year. But the semesters. But I need anatomy 1 and microbiology because I can't take 2 of the 3 classes I'm taking next semester unless I take these first 2 classes. So I decided to just take both of them at the same time. So next semester I have 3 more classes that are prereqs, which are anatomy and physiology 2, human development, and pathophysiology. I'm excited about patho and human development, not so excited about anatomy 2. I'm loving anatomy 1. It's just so much work. Anyway, now I'm going to talk to you guys about my binders. I have 2 binders, one for micro, which is this black one, and then I have one for anatomy and physiology. I think I'm going to switch them. The reason why I gave micro black and anatomy and physiology pink is because I'm keeping this one. I'm not keeping this one. But I have to switch them because my anatomy one is starting to be too full, which you guys will see in a second. The only other thing I have is this microbiology notebook. As you can see, it used to be for American government. And then it used to be for A&P, but I'm not using a binder for A&P. I'm using it for micro. So I thought it would be the other way around, where I would just use the PowerPoint notes for micro and the binder, in the notebook for A&P. But I only use the PowerPoint notes for A&P. So I need this for micro. I guess I'll go A&P and then micro, or maybe I should do micro first because it's a lot more. So micro for me is difficult and not difficult at the same time. It's not difficult in the aspect of you know everything, you know what's coming, but it is difficult in the understanding aspect if you're not like listening. And like these lectures that he records, it takes me, they're about an hour, no more than an hour 15, but it takes me about 3 hours to go through the entire lecture because of how much I take notes. So I will explain that, but first I'm going to explain what he gives us. So we'll go to this unit. We're on unit 4. We did 1, 2, 3. We're going to take 4 next week. We have 5 before we leave for Christmas break, and then we have a final. That's cumulative. The only cumulative final I have, but it's okay. So we get 2 PowerPoints for each unit. We get a selected diseases PowerPoint. This PowerPoint is just because, you know, microbiology, looking at, you know, stuff on bacteria, viruses on a microscopic level, and then we get the actual lecture notes as a PowerPoint as well. Now, the way I study the way I study everything is currently better than the way I've studied for the first 3 tests. The first one, the second one was better, the third one was even better, and this one I'm feeling amazing about. And it's just because of the way I'm studying and the way I'm letting myself retain the information for this class. So the reason why I can go off of the PowerPoint notes for A&P and not for microbiology are because of how little information he puts on the PowerPoints and how much he talks. So there's so much more you have to write down because he only puts like the bullet point for him to remember what to say, and then he goes on about that one thing for 10-20 minutes and then moves on to the next PowerPoint slide. It's one of those classes where you only get through like 5 PowerPoint slides in one class. Great, amazing. So I'm going to go through both PowerPoints. This PowerPoint, the selected diseases, he chooses between 5 and like 8 diseases because we have 5 lectures before each test. So this one he'll go over 1 disease and then he'll go over some of the lecture notes, or he'll choose 2 diseases and then go over some of the lecture notes. Either way, you get a disease and lecture notes for each class. Diseases first, lecture notes second. So for diseases, he always gives us background information, symptoms, causative agent, epidemiology, pathogenesis. He gives us everything like that for the disease. And then like for the test, he might ask you the causative agent. He might ask you what are the symptoms for that disease. He might ask you how does this disease affect the body, which is like, you know, the epidemiology, or how does the disease get transferred. I mixed that up. How does the disease get transferred? Epidemiology. How does the disease affect the body? Pathogenesis. So that's what the diseases are. It's really straightforward. I try to keep all my diseases notes. I write everything that I write down for these notes are in red. So I write down, I know what he says that might be on the test because what he says I write in red. And then I highlight each section. So like symptoms, causative agent, pathogenesis, epidemiology, stuff like that. Oh, and treatment. He also gives us like what are they called? Tabloids, stuff that might be in like the newspaper, on the internet. That stuff we don't need to remember. Next is selection notes, and I wanted to show you guys this unit because I love how I'm studying for this unit. So we're gonna go to this unit in my book, and you guys, I will tell you guys how you can tell that he writes so much. But every person is 1 different, and 2 I write humongous. Okay, so these are like, this is page 1 of my lecture 4, test 4, lecture 1 notes. And then in my PowerPoint that I print out, I'll also put it on top of the slide. So this is where we started for test 4 for the first lecture. And then if we go forward, I can show you guys exactly where my notes start for the next lecture, because I have test 4, lecture 2 at the top of that PowerPoint slide. And then I also have it at the top of my notes in my book, so I know exactly where I start the next lecture, exactly where I stopped for the first lecture, and where I can move on. This one is for lecture 3, but you get the gist. I put exactly where each lecture starts at the top of the slide and in my notes on a brand new page. So I'm gonna break down how this man talks. This man says what's on the slide, and then he'll talk about the stuff that's on the slide for 2 seconds, and then he'll move on to an example that's relevant/irrelevant for 30 minutes. And then he'll move on to the next point in the slide. So let me explain how I write that down in my notes. So a great example is this last lecture that we just had, because it was so example driven, so that we would understand stuff. Which is why I said relevant, not relevant, because the examples help sometimes, they're irrelevant other times. So I'm gonna make sure you guys can see this. Okay, so we're gonna back up just a little bit. I don't know what you guys can see. Why is the saturation so much? I don't understand. I don't know. But okay, so stuff that I have like up here in blue is stuff that's like you need to know, you need to remember, you need to understand before we start the actual lecture notes. And then the stuff he says is in red, and then the examples are in blue, and in pencil. So if you go to another page, this one is a great example. I have something we need to know / questions and stuff. I put in blue, and then examples in pencil, and then what he says in red. Another example in pencil, what he says in red. And as you can see from this page, he did a lot of back and forth. Example, what he said. Example, what he said. The example is technically stuff he says, but I do want to know the difference between it being something I need to know and it being an example type thing. Now let me explain all the different... Sorry, you might want to see my face. But now let me explain all the different colors I have in my binder. I already explained the different pencil colors. Blue is like tips or like questions he may ask, or like know this before moving on to the next point. Red is stuff that he says, and pencil is examples. Now I have other colors up in this binder. So let me turn to lecture 3 and my notes. Alright, so this example shows the pink, because pink is always, let me back up so you guys can see both of these a little bit. Pink is always a big point. It's either going to be pink, and then I change to green, and then I go back to pink. So I go back and forth between the sub points. So let me explain that better. So this one is talking about mutagen repairs, and the sub points are you can repair them this way, this way or this way. And then we move on to the next one. How can you make money from mutagens? This one in green, and then this one in green, and then this one in green. And then I go back to pink. Horizontal gene transfer. This is how you do that. This is how you do that. I don't know if you guys see that one. And this is how you do that. So I think we only had 3 subpoints. 3 sections of subpoints. Yeah, we only had 3 sections of subpoints, and then we moved on to a final example. So that is what the green and pink in my binder means. So what does the yellow mean? The yellow is always questions. Sometimes I accidentally write questions in red when I mean to write them in blue, which is why I started highlighting them. I don't know if I have an example because I have gotten better, but yeah, I do have an example. So like if I write a question and it's in red, that's why I started highlighting them so I would know the question. And also, not everything blue is a question. And I want to know the questions because they could be similar questions on the actual test. So I want to know what the questions are. I want to know like how to answer those questions. Like for one, the one I have here that's highlighted, but in red, I have how do you tell them apart? So I want to know, how do I tell plasmids apart? How do I know which plasmid has the X-gal, which plasmid has the LAC-Z? How do you know all of that? So that's why we have yellow. The last color in my notes is orange. And maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't. I have orange also in my PowerPoint notes because, you know, I use my notes and the PowerPoint notes side by side when I'm studying for the test. So if I go back to the beginning of my lecture 3 notes in my notebook and we compare it to my PowerPoint notes, I'm gonna go forward with this too because I can't exactly zoom in right now. But I have like mutagen repair has a orange mark next to it and the number 49. That same thing on my PowerPoint notes is highlighted and labeled 49. So the reason why this is so important for me is because, like I said, the way he teaches is so example driven. I have so many pencil notes that he says, but before he moves on to the next point, I want to make sure I read all the examples in my notes so I understand it. So let me explain that better by giving you an example. I guess that's why he does it. So if we go to epidemiology, is this the best example? No, it's not. Okay, I bullied my computer and she turned off, so I had to turn her back on. I'm so sorry. I was giving you guys an example of how my orange numbers match up. So, I have animal testing in here labeled, what is it, 53. Now we go to my notes and I have animal testing in here as 53. But then I have Ames test labeled as 54. But before I move on to 54 in my notes, I know I have to read all of this, and then, oh hey, there's 54 in my notes. So I want to make sure I go through all of my personal notes before moving on to his next bullet point. Because like I said, my professor doesn't put everything on the PowerPoint. He puts a bullet point and then talks for a while. So I have these notes to help me understand what each little bullet point is. Going forward, moving on. I used the wrong transition there. Some people may not want to do this. I personally didn't want to do this because of how much I would have to write. And that's my reason for not wanting to is proven in the way I study now. I didn't want it to take forever for me to watch the lecture. It now takes me 3 hours to watch an hour lecture. I didn't want to write a lot. I have, for lecture 3 alone that I just showed you guys, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 pages of notes for one lecture. I didn't want to do that. That's part of the reason why I didn't start studying like that. But the way it's helping me is so amazing. I understand every single thing he says because of the way I study, or the way I take notes for the lecture. So now let's go over reviewing for this class. Reviewing for this class, there's no review questions, there's no study guide. He's not that kind of teacher. Just know the lectures and take the test. So if we go to my lecture, we're going to number 1, so you guys can see another one. You have to know how to review for yourself. That's the point I'm getting at, so let me hurry up. My point here is you have to know how you retain information and review. For me, the first step in retaining information is doing it. I have to do it some way, somehow. And for lectures, for micro lectures, doing it means writing, which is why I take 3 hours to do a lecture, where I write 20 pages of notes, because writing is the first step to helping me understand. Because he might say something, and I'm like, what do you mean? And then I'll rewind it one more time, and I'm like, what do you mean? And then I will go through, rewind it, write 3 or 4 words, press play, write 3 or 4 words, and when I finish the sentence and reread it for myself, I'm like, oh, that's what you mean. But that's all because I'm a kinesthetic learner. I'm a touch learner. I have to do it to understand it. So that's what I do. I write the notes, and then I review it yet again, because I don't do any of the orange matching up until I'm done with the lecture. I go back through the lecture and I match up my notes with my orange highlighter and match up the numbers. So that's my second time going through all the notes. I went through it one time by writing down what I need to write down. Went through it a second time by matching up my numbers with my lecture notes. And now, and finally, I should say, I write everything on the board. I have a library that has boards in certain sections, and I write all the notes on the board. So I have this one and this one for lecture 1. I have 2 for lecture 2. I have 3 for lecture 3. We have 2 more lectures. One is already out. I just didn't get to it. Today is Saturday. I don't do work on Saturday. So I just decided that I would do that tomorrow, because after I do these, I've gone through it once with the lecture, I've gone through it with highlighting and numbering, and then I've gone through it a 3rd time. By the time I'm done with this outline, I am more than ready to start the next lecture. And that's why I haven't started lecture 4 yet, because I finished lecture 3, I matched up numbers in lecture 3, I made my outline for lecture 3, then the library closed. I didn't get to start it, and that was yesterday. So that's why I haven't started lecture 3 yet, simply because I was just trying to be the best productive or the most productive as I can, because I know that starting lecture 4 without truly understanding lecture 3 was not going to work for me. So that's everything from micro. And at this point, I'm going to put everything up first. Oh yeah, it's Halloween. Happy Halloween, guys. So, before I eat this piece of candy, I am going to look at how long this video is before adding in A&P. If this video is longer than, I'm going to say about 10 minutes, I am going to separate micro and anatomy. But I do want to show you guys both.